blah blah. Hello folks, this will be a quick description of the CV2 approach. It'll be a differences brief with the assumption that most of you are familiar with the much more common CV1 approach. Checking in and marshal procedures for the CV2 approach are identical to those utilized for the CV1, with the exception that the marshal pattern itself is located overhead the ship much closer in. The lowest holding altitude is the same, 6,000 feet. However, the first holding fix is on the marshal radial at 4 DME. All courses are in reference to the final bearing. In today's example, the BRC is 159 degrees, and so the final bearing will be 9 degrees less, and that's on a Nimitz-class carrier, so it'll be 150 degrees. The marshal radial is the final bearing plus 30 degrees, so 180 degrees will be your marshal radial, which makes the inbound course 360 degrees, or your reciprocal. At push time, report commencing and continue straight ahead, straight and level at 250 knots to 4 DME on the far side of the ship. And that's correct. You don't descend at your fixed point. Once at 4 DME on the other side of the ship, begin your penetration descent at 4,000 feet per minute and 250 knots until you reach platform at 5,000 feet, and then continue your descent at 2,000 feet per minute at 250 knots until reaching 1/3 your marshal altitude. For example, if you were at 10,000 feet, 1/3 would be about 3,300 feet. So at that point, you want to level off and begin a left turn as long as you're beyond 10 nautical miles from the ship. Begin a level turn at 250 knots to intercept the final bearing by 10 nautical miles inbound. Once inbound, descend to 1,200 feet at 250 knots. The rest is the same as the CV1 approach. At 8 DME, transition to the landing configuration. At 6 DME, verify and fly the needles. And at 3 DME, begin your final descent. In low visibility conditions, our minimums when flying the ICLS approach are 360 feet and 3/4 of a mile visibility. The LSO will tell you to continue if he believes you're in a good position to land. He will likely see you before you see the ball. Okay folks, here we are overhead the CV. We're actually about 39 miles from it, closing on my marshal radial. The marshal I was given was 10,000 feet at 8 miles, and that's based on a CV2 approach which begins at 4 miles and 6,000 feet. So whatever your mileage is, you add 2,000 feet to that in thousands of feet, and that's your marshaling altitude. And for today's demo, I'm not going to worry about a marshal time. We'll just push when I get to the fix. So again, 8 miles at 10,000 feet, and I'm just heading inbound. The marshaling radial was 180, which for a course that's 360, and it looks like I'm correcting back to the left since I'm right of course. And then I'll, once I'm on the radial, which I'm pretty close to now, I will go ahead and center that up. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the EW stuff. We don't need that for this demo. And I'm pretty close to it, so I'm going to bring it back to center line here slowly, since I'm still making up a few percentages of 1 degree. Okay, and I want to slow to about 250 because that's what I'm going to push at. Now I'd be at 300 knots ground speed as I approach this, hopefully if I did everything right on a normal one, but I'm just going to set 250 because that's what I'm going to use once I push. And I'm going to we're close enough, so I'm going to set ATC. We're at 29 miles, so we have a ways to go. And again, this is a CV2 approach, and we basically hold overhead the ship. We push outbound for a teardrop entry, all of which I described earlier before we started this flight, so I won't bore you with going through that again. But in the cockpit, I've got my hook bypass and carrier. I'm going to turn my anti-skid off. I've got my I'm clean at the moment, so my flaps and gear are not down yet. I'm maintaining 250 knots for the purpose of this description, and we're moving in to my push point of 8 miles. I've got the course line centered up there on my MPCD and on my DDI1. I'm going to go ahead and put the link on this page here so we can see where tankers are and where the AWACS is if we so desire. Again, we're at 23 miles inbound. I also have the hook down, so we're ready for that. And I also have about 10 grand on fuel, so I want to dump that. So once we get a little closer here, so I know there's no holding given. So usually I start that when I hit my push point. So at 8 miles, if I don't forget, I'll start my my dump, and and our fuel will work out to be somewhere. Oops, I want to add that in there. Okay, so I'm going to take it to about high 60s because it'll be done before we get to the landing pattern. So I'll have a little bit to burn down to the max trap. So we're well over the max trap now, but we'll fix that as we dump. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and report inbound on button 1, although that's not going to work because I don't have the frequency set up properly. But the answer I would get would not be what I want to hear because it's set up for a CV1 approach, not for the CV2. So if we're going to do this in DCS, you're going to have a human marshal to do that. I'm not aware that DCS has a CV2 approach scripted out yet. Now, in the real Navy, I almost never did this. We did do it on a couple occasions, but I think it was either for training or for airspace, but I don't remember which. We certainly did it in training in the sim, but we also did it in real life at least once or twice. It's not very common. The situations that require it are not common, at least they weren't when I was active Navy. Okay, we're at a little less than 13 miles inbound, heading towards 8 miles. One of the first differences you'll notice between the CV1 and CV2 is that I don't descend at my push point. I will continue straight ahead at 250 knots to go to 4 miles on the other side of the TACAN, other side of the ship to begin my descent. And I will descent to 1/3 my martial altitude, which in this case will be about 3,300 feet. And at that point I'll do a level turn in a teardrop fashion back into the carrier on the final bearing. And from there on in, it's pretty much a CV1 approach. The tricky part is just remembering all the the mental gymnastics required to get the bearings and headings and courses and turns all straight. Right now I have my TACAN set to my the course for my inbound flight on the radio, which also translates to my outbound flight on the radio as well. And just like all TACANs, there is a cone of confusion right overhead the station itself, and we'll see that the needle swap ends once we're inside of about 2 miles or so, 2.5 miles. Since we're so low, we're only at 10,000 feet. So the cone of confusion is smaller than it would be if we were up at higher altitude. Okay, and you can chase the needle up to about 3 miles, and then you want to quit chasing it because it's going to go out and come back fairly quickly, as you'll see. Okay, there's 2 miles, so it should be heading outbound here shortly. There's the dots, and there the needle starts moving out, and it'll go all the way out and then come all the way back fairly quickly as we cross overhead. So now we're heading outbound on the radio, and we're now on the 360 radio, and we're looking for 4 miles, which is where we will begin our actual descent. And just like with the CV1, we'll start out with a 4,000 foot per minute rate of descent until we get to platform, i.e. 5,000 feet. And then we'll reduce that to 2,000, and we'll continue that until we intercept the minute to live rule. Okay, coming up on 4 miles, so I'm going to click off the ATC and the hold, and there's 4 miles, so I'm going to begin my rate of descent, trying to maintain that 250. So just slowly getting into it. And getting a little bit fast, so I'm going to use a little bit of speed brake. And I'm come back towards the TACAN needle because I'm flying the TACAN at the moment. Stay on the needle, outbound. There's 250. Okay, there's 6,800 feet. A little fast. And I'm a little bit fast on the rate of descent, which is what's causing that. So let's keep it right about 4,000, which is right about there. And we're coming up on 5,000 feet or platform, and Bitch and Betty should remind us. Okay, and so we will raise it up to about 2,000 foot per minute rate of descent, and then I'm going to go ahead and set ATC again to maintain that close to 250. We were slow for a while, so being a little fast is not going to hurt us. Okay, now we're looking for 3,300 feet. And at that point, I will level off. I'm going to start my dump to get down to the proper fuel weight. Coming up on 3,300 feet. Okay, that's close enough, and I'm going to start a left-hand turn. And now that I'm in the turn, the level, I'm going to go ahead and change my TACAN course needle to set it to the BRC, which is what I like. It does a couple of things, which I'll explain in just a second once I get it set up. 159 is the BRC. Two things it does. First of all, it declutters the ICLS needle, so it's clear what I'm actually flying inbound, and that's important, especially in low visibility like it is today. And also, it gives me a little bit of heads-up warning for when I'm going to intercept the final bearing, as you'll see here shortly. And watch the tail of the TACAN needle on my DDI-1, which is that little bright tick. And I'm going to go ahead and cage my flight path vector, or velocity vector, so you can, it's right in the center of the screen there. Okay, and I'm also going to get more perspective here, so I'm going to go down two notches to 5 there. And you can see the needle starting to come in. It's got a ways to go. And at 20 miles roughly on the TACAN, that's 3 radials per degree. And we're about 10 degrees, so that's in the 100% or 10%, 1% rule. So I'm just going to start a turn to pick up an intercept heading. And then once I'm clearly inbound, then I will start my descent to 1,200 feet. Okay, my fuel's set properly, and notice it didn't take a whole lot of time to dump all that fuel. Okay, I'm about
I think 183 or so, 185 is where I'm going to stop my turn until I get a little closer to the final bearing. And I'm going to start my descent. I'm going to take the ATC off, pull the power back to slow down a little bit. But I want to maintain 250. And of course, I don't want to exceed 2,000 rate of descent. But then I want to pick up the minute to live rule. Now you can see that I'm approaching the full deflection of the tachyon needle, which is 8 degrees. And a fully deflected, or the distance between the final bearing and the BRC is 9 degrees. So it's pretty close to a full deflected when the ICLS should be centered. Okay, 2,200 feet, 1,000 feet to go. Okay, I'm close enough here now that I'm just going to let it center up, because I think the effective final bearing is about 153. Okay, I'm in the minute to live rule regime, and I'm coming up, descending too far, so let's go ahead and level off, get back to 1,200 feet. Oops, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong instrument there. Let's go down to 1,200 feet. Still a little bit left of course, 250 knots, and just inside 13 miles. Okay, there's 1,200 feet, or 1,400 feet, looking for 12. Slowly coming up, just a little bit over, 12. So I'm just going to level off here. I can fine tune it once I'm clean, or actually once I'm dirty. Sorry. Okay, and I'm going to, the ATC is off, and I'm going to maintain 250 until I get to 10 miles. And it looks like I'm pretty much on center line, so I'm going to try to fly 153, which I think is the effective final bearing, and that's the actual final bearing plus ship's movement and wind. Seems like it's holding it pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and dirty up now, approaching 8 miles, so I want to slow down to 250. And there's 250, so gears coming and flaps are coming down. Hook is already down. Fuel is set. Okay, now I just want to adjust the trim. And I'm going a little bit right of course, so I want to go to about 150 here briefly, and then set the trim. And it should be around 12 degrees. Okay, back to 153 and up to level. Right about there. Taking a look at the trim. Trim looks good. Maybe a small click. Looking good. Okay, I'm on center line. Just about 1,200 feet. 10 feet low. And coming up on 6 miles and needle call. A little bit slightly left of course, so I'm moving over to 153, 153 and a half. Something like that. Okay. Fly straight, fly up. So needles look good. Okay, let's climb that extra 10 feet here. And looks like maybe the effective final course or final bearing is closer to 154 degrees. Okay, we're at 5 miles, looking for 3 to begin my rate of descent. Okay, everything now is the same as CV1 approach. Now, visibility today is pretty limited, so I'm not sure we're going to see the flight deck until the last minute, so we have to fly very precisely the ICLS to be sure we're lined up properly. Now, it's possible you can see the lineup light through the fog. Just barely. Okay, 1,200 feet, 3.9 miles, looking for 3. And I'm still a little left of course, and I'm holding 155, so it's maybe closer to 154 is the actual bearing, actual final bearing. I don't want to go too far over. Let's stay one that's close to, there we go. There's 1,200 feet, 3.3 coming up on the descent. And about 3.1 miles, I'm going to go ahead and pull the power back and lower the nose to about 3 degrees. And I can see the lineup light, it's pretty far to the left, so I'm going to come back, sneak back a little bit to 153 and just see what happens here. See if there's that much wind that's blowing me that way. Okay, at 2 miles I should be 800 feet, and it looks like I'm going a little bit left, so maybe I want to come back. Maybe 154 is what I want, even though it does seem a little far from the lineup light. We'll see. Okay, 2 miles, 860 feet, 840 feet, so we're not too bad. I'm definitely too far left now, so I've got to come back. 155, drive back into it. Okay, and we've got 6.0 on the gas. And we're maybe getting a little low, so I'm going to hold off maybe about 2.5 degrees instead of 3. And at 1 mile, we should be 400 feet. Oh, I'm going a little bit right here, so I want to come back a little left, just a little bit, not too much, back right about there.
407 continue.
Right about there. Okay, and maybe a little bit high, so let's come down just a little bit. I'm starting to see the ship. Going a little bit right of course. 407, Hornet ball, 5.9. Okay, a little bit of right for line up there. Watching the ball. It's kind of hard to see, but we're looking pretty good, I think. A little low. Ah, not bad. Okay, clearing the deck. And from here, it's just the same as parking on the flight deck. Well, there you have it. There's the CV2 approach. Hope you guys enjoyed it.